Listener beware, No Time to Game is a podcast chock full with spoilers. If your intent is to play this game and you don't wish the ending to be spoiled, turn back now. And then come back when you're done and let's talk about it. Welcome to No Time to Game, a quest for game-life balance where we play and talk about short games, indie games, and anything else that doesn't demand you sacrifice your relationships or grind out those season passes. I'm Devin, and I just don't have the hundreds and hundreds of hours anymore to play MMOs, open-world games, and loot grinds.
And I'm Josh, and I have a new mic this week.
This week I played Battletoads on Xbox One, developed by Dalala Studios and published by Xbox Game Studios. It's a remake of a classic NES and arcade game that stayed true to its roots while adding a Saturday morning cartoon feel that left me feeling good.
I'm going to hit you with a new segment I want to start this week, where I want to go through some Steam reviews and see what other people thought about this game. I poked through a big list of Steam reviews and plucked out a couple of my favorites. This person said, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles sure do look different.
Yeah, I guess there are some similarities there.
Another one just said, I think it's pretty neat.
What a wordsmith.
I think it's a pretty important thing you got to get into your review. Like, you finish up playing this game, you got to rush off, get on the Steam forums, and let people know you thought it was pretty neat.
Well, yes, of course. That they're a professional. They've got
it's important.
Lots of people reading these reviews.
Swayed a lot of minds to,
Yes.
I guess I will buy this game because Steam user 4483 thought it was pretty neat. And my personal favorite, the dangerous frogs have good jokes.
Well, that they did. I really enjoyed the jokes in this game. And the Dangerous Frogs or the Ninja Turtles or whatever, they were a good time. They were a real good time.
So one thing that I noticed, though, pouring through these reviews was that, man, this game was really polarizing. Everyone either absolutely loved it or thought it was the worst thing they've ever played. And
Is that right?
I think a lot of people have real strong feelings about these three green boys, that they, I don't know, really love them from their childhood or something. And everyone seemed to think that this either did the old games perfect justice and was wonderful, or it ruined the franchise and destroyed their childhoods.
Well, isn't that interesting? I mean, I wouldn't say I fell on either side of that, because somehow I managed to miss this game from my childhood. I didn't know about it. I didn't hear about it until you suggested it to me. So, yeah, I mean, this I didn't have anything to compare it to. I mean, I did, as we'll get into later, I did play the originals afterwards. And I have some opinions that I'd like to share about that a little later. But, yeah, I mean, certainly didn't ruin my childhood. I will say that.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to not really like the art style and the way they kind of went for that Saturday morning cartoon vibe. I liked it. I thought it was fun.
I loved that part.
Yeah. I liked the art style, the graphics, everything. The cutscenes in between I thought were fantastic. I mean, they were a little bit childish, but I think we're a little bit childish, so that works for us.
Indeed, yeah. It gave me Teletoon vibes. Like it definitely made me feel like I wasn't playing a game anymore, that I was just watching, like I said, Saturday morning cartoons as a kid. It was very Teletoon, very, I mean, who did you say was one of the artists on this game?
I think, I don't know if it was the artist. I think that one of the writers or some of the writers came from Rick and Morty, were writers for Rick and Morty, and some of the voice actors as well. So, I mean, this was very far from Rick and Morty content-wise, but I think you could kind of sense the same bit of, like, goofy space humor kind of stuff that you might see in Rick and Morty.
Yeah, definitely some similarities.
And another thing this game did was it took the story and continued from the original, but in a way that, 30 years or whatever had passed, whatever it's been since the original came out. And it started off with the Battletoads kind of waking up from, I don't remember what it was. They were in cryo sleep or a coma or something, and where they had been basically reliving their past for the 30 years inside their own heads or something. And I think that irked some people as well. I think people thought that, the Battletoads were cool and the Dark Queen was evil, and this game sort of made a mockery of that.
No, I didn't see it that way. I mean, like I said, I didn't have an opinion about this game beforehand. Maybe if I had played it and loved it as a child, I would have. But um, I mean, it didn't seem like it was mocking the other one. It did seem like it was. There were a lot of elements of the original games in this that I think they did really well. And just like a lot of the mechanics, it was difficult, not as difficult as the originals, um, but yeah, no, I don't think it was a mockery at all.
Yeah, I agree. I think it maybe depends too what games you played when you were a kid, because the original Battletoads. So you went back and played the original Battletoads, and that it seems to be where they got a lot of their inspiration for, the different genres kind of mashed up, and sort of it was kind of difficult, not as hard obviously as the NES game, but it seemed like they were kind of following that formula of, having a bunch of different level types jammed in together. There was also the arcade game that you played, which was more just strictly beat 'em up. And the one that I played the most as a kid was Battletoads and Double Dragon, which I believe was also mostly a beat 'em up, although I don't really remember that game very much. So maybe a lot of these people that remembered the Battletoads remembered them from that, and that's why they felt like it was sort of weird and out of place to have all these levels. But going back and playing the original afterwards, I think it kind of made sense. It sort of stuck to the same formula that they seemed to use in the first one.
Yeah, I mean, to differentiate, I played a bit of the NES from 1991, and then I went on to play the arcade game from 1994, and they were very different games. Like you said, the arcade game was purely just beat 'em up, um, just just hordes of enemies. You're fighting them, you defeat them, you move on. It would have been very hard if it were not for the fact that it was made for arcade. So whenever I died, I just had to press A to essentially put in another quarter and continue. Your 10, 9, 8 continue countdown. You just press A and you've got your lives again. So that one I beat in an hour.
Yeah.
But it was hard. Would have been hard if I was playing it in an arcade in the 90s. The 1991, however, that I couldn't beat that one. That was near impossible, even with the added feature of being able to rewind, with it being in the rare replay on Game Pass, being able to rewind back however many seconds and get a bit of a redo. I still couldn't get very far in it. It was very difficult. I mean, the different types of levels. There was a couple beat 'em up. They weren't as beat 'em up as 94 or the 2020 remake, but then there's all the racing levels that were near impossible.
Yeah, so that level that I think you beat it with many, many rewinds, but it's called Turbo Tunnel, I believe. And it's just like a notoriously difficult video game level. Like, you look up, top 10 most difficult video game levels, that's going to be on every list. And it was brutal. But I think that's an interesting thing that we've been seeing quite a bit of recently, is people revamping these franchises that were popular back in the NES and arcade eras and stuff, where, games had to be difficult or you were going to beat them in 4 minutes because they weren't very big back then. So I think this game sort of had to strike that balance between being hard and being, too short and all these things. And I think they did a pretty good job. I mean, it was tough at times, but I didn't find it too frustrating. I
I
don't know
agree
if
with
you,
that.
yeah, I don't think it was crazy. It wasn't horribly long. I think you clocked in at around 5 or 6 hours. Right.
5 or 6 hours. Yeah, I didn't. I mean, I didn't play it on the easiest difficulty. I didn't play it on the hardest difficulty. I was right there in the middle where I normally live, and I found most of the levels pretty easy, with a few, few deaths and redos. The style of level that I struggled with the most was the space levels when you were in the spaceship flying around and there's hundreds and hundreds of projectiles flying at you. I got frustrated with those. That was the only point in the game that I got frustrated though.
Yeah. So yeah, this game started out with as a beat 'em up for the first couple levels. And then there was a level where you were riding on jet bikes, which was sort of their homage to the turbo tunnel, I think.
Right.
And then there was those spaceship levels that were sort of a bullet hell kind of genre. There was a few platformer levels that were more like, almost felt a little bit like Donkey Kong Country or something.
It did a bit.
And there was the level that you were on like a sled and you had to jump and keep pressing all the different buttons depending on which terrain type you were falling on.
Well, that one was a bit frustrating too. I forgot about that level.
Yeah, that was my least favorite. That one annoyed me.
Yeah.
And then there was a bunch of mini games as well, I would say, that were like part levels. There was one where you were playing Toad Shambo, which was like, instead of rock paper scissors, it was like toaster fish something. Do you remember that?
I think it was toaster, and then there was like a hand puppet of a toad and a French horn.
Okay, yeah, that sounds right.
Which I mean, I could tell obviously that it was a play on rock paper scissors, but even with the little guide in the bottom right to say which beat which, I wasn't following. They were too strange.
I don't
So
know
was
if
just
you could really mess that up anyway. I mean, with
no,
rock paper scissors, I think it was just you just played it
just
no
keep
matter what.
pressing a button until
Yeah.
until something happens.
There was also at the start there was a set of mini games where the Toads had regular jobs working in offices and stuff.
I liked
That
that.
that was
Quite
kind of
funny.
funny. It was sort of like little quick time events. And there was one other one where you were in when you were in the spaceship, you had to repair your systems or something, and
That was near the end.
yeah, and it was like a bunch of little puzzly mini game things all in one. And that one was kind of cool as well. That was like, it reminded me. There's a game, and I meant to look up what it was called, but I didn't, and I don't remember.
Did you hear that sound? That means I'm talking to you from the future to clarify something our past selves failed to. The name of the game that Josh is referring to is called Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. And now back to your regularly scheduled programming.
You are trying to defuse a bomb, and one person has the bomb, and everybody else has an instruction manual for the bomb, and there's a bunch of little mini game type things that are very similar to that, and the people with the manual have to walk the person with the bomb through diffusing it, and that's kind of what that reminded me of.
I mean, the puzzles themselves. You've got a large screen with more and more puzzles as you advance, and a timer that's constantly going down to solve all these. And the simplicity of the puzzles reminded me of like Among Us tasks.
Mm-hmm.
You're literally just the hardest part for me was finding where that puzzle was, because you're given a symbol and you've got to match it with the symbol on the puzzle. So the hardest part was just finding it. That seemed to take the longest. And then once you found it, it was just like, okay, well, I just have to press my right joystick up twice and then down once. That's really easy. But then we've got to move on, and we've got another one, and none of them are hard. It's just you've got to be quick. You've got to be very tuned in.
Yeah, I don't even remember noticing that there was symbols at the top either. I think I just started mashing buttons and looked at the box to see which things were moving. So I think
No, I
brute
matched that
forced
up right
it a little
away.
bit. Yeah, you looked like you had it sort of more figured out than I did. But yeah, was there any other bits that I'm forgetting?
I mean, there was the other one where there was a bit of a kind of a segue where if you've not watched any of the battle, if you've not played any of the Battletoads, there's three of them. Their names are Zitz, Pimple, and Rash. Um, Pimple is the big, beefy, strong one. Rash is the cool sunglasses one, and Zitz is the leader, and he wears like bandolier of ammunition over his shoulders, and he's fast and he's strong, kind of thing. Anyway, I preferred playing as Zitz. But Pimple goes on a bit of a segue where he doesn't want to be he doesn't want to be violent anymore. So he leaves the other two to do their space battles, and he finds this I don't really know what it is. It's kind of like a hippie cult type of situation that he tries to climb this mountain, and there's I think 3 or 4 different levels of doing this platformer style mountain climbing, different puzzles. It was very relaxing, even the music, because normally it was right after a space battle. So I was very high stress on the space battle, and then I'd get rewarded with a Pimple climbing this mountain to enlightenment level, which was really nice. I got to breathe a little bit. But the reason I'm saying this is because at the end, when he got to the top of the mountain, the leader of this cult said, now you have to start worshiping. I think it might have been Brian. Jason, thank you. You have to start worshiping Jason now. And she points to who Jason is, and it's just like this. Do you remember what it was?
It was
like a
basically just a shitty cave painting of a three-eyed face.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. And he didn't like that. He was just like, well, what if I don't believe in Jason? And then she's like, well, you have to believe in Jason. This is like, you're in the cult now. And he loses his shit, and he just starts just punching all of these cult members. And it's just, it's mostly just like pressing the right buttons at the right time, but it's all like freeze frame kind of mini game where you're punching to the left, you're punching up, you're punching to the right, and it just kind of gets a little bit faster. And
yeah, there was a lot of segments like that where it was kind of like a bunch of QuickTime events all thrown together. There was I remember that now. He was punching people, and then it would switch to somebody taking like photos on a smartphone, and then
one of the Dark Queen's minions that he brought with him.
Yeah, and then there was a third guy that was like punching down chunks of trees or something. Yeah. That was kind of interesting too. There's a game that I had on the Switch that was basically just that part with the trees. It was like a 99-cent game. I forget what that was called too.
Timberman versus.
But you just basically raced each other to see who could punch down these trees the fastest, and it was almost exactly like what that was in the Battletoads. But yeah, so there was basically those types of levels: the mini games, the sled, the bullet hell, the platformer, the jet bike, and the beat 'em up. What of those was your favorite? Like, which ones did you like? Which didn't you like?
I've already said I didn't like the space ones. Some of that was fun. Like in the beginning when it wasn't too hard, it was fun. It's worth mentioning that I had, since I was on the middle difficulty, after you die so many times, it gives you an option of having invincibility mode, which I was kind of waiting for at that point. I was just kind of dying almost on purpose, so that I could get that invincibility mode, and then it doesn't matter how many times you get hit, you can beat the level. So nothing was so frustrating that I was not enjoying myself.
Yeah, they didn't really let you get stuck, which was nice.
That's right, exactly. So that, I would say that genre of level would be my least favorite. But up at the top, I mean, I did enjoy just the straight beat 'em up levels, but I don't know, the platformer was also really really fun. I like the puzzles. There's no actual enemies. You're just trying to figure out how to pass through to the next scene. I'm I'm gonna say the platformer would be at the top, and then after that, beat 'em up, and then after that would be the like the bikes. I liked the hover bikes that you're trying to avoid all these walls and jumping and things. And then after that would be that sled level, where you've got to press a lot of buttons really quickly to land on different types of terrain. And then after that would be the space.
Yeah, I would be pretty much the same, except the platformer was my least favorite, probably. Well, the sled level was my least favorite, and platformer was second least. Otherwise, pretty much the same order. I think, though, the nice thing about these was that each one of these genres, there was only a couple of levels that used them. So none of them really got stale. Like, I think an entire game made up of any one of these, other than probably beat 'em up, I don't think I would have liked.
No,
Like
too much.
otherwise it didn't really hold up for long periods, but a level or two was kind of fine. So that was kind of nice. And those mini games were kind of sprinkled in the middle to break things up a bit too. And it all kind of drug things out a bit, so the game didn't feel too short, but it didn't feel too samey.
No, it was very varied for sure. Yeah. And I mean, and also if you really enjoyed a certain style of game, there was bound to be at least another one or two of that style.
Yeah.
Which I enjoyed.
Yeah, I think they did a pretty good job sort of taking a whole bunch of very different stuff and blending it all together into one fairly good game. Like we said, there was a few things that didn't really work, but overall, I really liked it. But yeah, going back to the reviews that I read, people were pretty all over the place with whether or not they liked some of this stuff. I didn't really see a whole lot of people complaining particularly about any one part other than the beat 'em up, which was interesting because I thought that was the strongest one.
Right.
But a lot of people seemed unhappy with it. I think this came out kind of in a year with a lot of beat 'em ups, which is weird because it hasn't really been a very popular genre for, I don't know, quite some time. It was pretty big in the 90s, I think, and then it sort of fizzled out a bit. But just in the last year or so, we got this game, Streets of Rage 4 just came out, River City Girls, which is a sequel to River City Madness, I think it was called, on the NES.
River City Ransom.
They just re-released Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Like, there was a whole bunch of them all came out in this last year or so. And I wonder if, in comparison to those, maybe these people didn't really like Battletoads, or if it's one of those situations where this isn't how I remember beat 'em ups. I played this in 1994 and I don't want it to be different.
Right. People don't love change a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Don't do well with it.
But I thought it was fine, the beat 'em ups, and I played most of those games I just mentioned, and they were all vastly different, but I think all of the modern beat 'em ups now have this kind of cartoony art style because they all used to use pixel art because it was a genre that was around kind of in the Super Nintendo NES era. And I don't know why, I guess you don't see a lot of pixel art beat 'em ups these days, but everybody seems to have moved on to the cartoon style.
Yeah, I mean, I like the cartoon style, but I would appreciate a pixel art beat 'em up for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning too, like you said, that you went back and played those old ones, and the arcade game actually seems to still hold up quite well.
Yes.
I was watching you play it, and I actually will probably go back and play that because it looked quite fun.
It was quite fun. It moved pretty quickly. It didn't, like, from 91 to 94, it seemed like a big jump.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was because it was made for arcade and not for NES. I'm not really sure why, but The
Yeah,
graphics.
I think that was those few years was a big jump in video game technology in general.
Sure, yeah, the graphics didn't seem that they weren't that bad at all for a '90s game. It still definitely holds up. Worth playing today for sure. I wouldn't recommend anyone play the '91 version unless you're
Yeah.
a sucker for punishment.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, NES games are hard to
Hmm.
go back to. Even with, things like Rewind or using Game Genie or whatever. Like, there's very few NES games that I find really hold up. Your Mario games are still good and a couple others, but for the most part, it was also frustratingly difficult. And we just sort of have different sensibilities now. We don't tolerate one game taking forever and being stuck in the same spot and replaying the same things over and over in the same way that we used to.
No, we get bored much more easily.
Yeah. Well, there's so many more games too now. Like, back then we were kids and it was whatever games your parents would get for you as often as they would get them for you. And now, you have things like Game Pass and Steam libraries and all this stuff that everybody seems to have a backlog of 500 games they're meaning to get around to. And it really makes it hard to, spend 3 hours on one level of the original Battletoads.
Right, you move on so much quicker than we used to. Yeah, you get bored
Yeah.
for 10 minutes on a game and you're done. You move on.
Yeah. Another thing we didn't really mention was that these games are co-op, and I think that even includes the original.
Yes.
I think the original and the arcade were 2-player co-op, and this one was up to 3. We both played it single player, so I can't really say what that was like. You didn't go back and try it co-op or anything, did you?
I only have one controller that works right now.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't know if that changes things up much, or I think it's probably more fun to play with a friend. Most things are, but as a single player game, I thought it was just fine.
I agree.
But it would be nice to actually play with somebody sometime and see how different that is. I have a feeling some parts would be a lot easier.
It would be a good time to play with 2 other people, couch co-op. I think that would be a good way to spend an evening for sure.
Yeah, I think they did some stuff with the difficulty too, where if you were playing alone, you got more hits. Like in the jet bike levels, you could lose each of the toads, but in the if you were playing with 3 players, if all 3 of you got hit at the same time, that's probably it. You had to restart.
Right.
But by yourself, you could kind of get hit 3 times per checkpoint. And same with the beat 'em ups and
You could
stuff
switch
as well.
to the other toads at any time.
So that's pretty much it for gameplay stuff. The only thing that we haven't really mentioned is there was a lot of collectibles in this game as well. And I noticed that you were kind of going after them at the start of the game, and the longer it went on, you sort of went after them less and less. I kind of had the same thing where it didn't seem to really be doing anything.
Yeah, I think they were in there for the completionists, but I honestly didn't even notice them at first. Even after it introduced them, I kind of saw the first one go by on a train, but I didn't think anything of it until one of the kids came upstairs. They were watching on the TV downstairs, and they said, "You should go back and use your tongue and grab that collectible." Leave it to the 7-year-old. So I went back and I got it, and then I noticed on the way through that I had missed 2 or 3 more. So I got those ones because the first few levels they put them pretty obvious. But yeah, like you said, after probably level 3, I wasn't trying anymore. They became quite difficult to get. The levels themselves became a lot more difficult. So just completing them were more of a challenge, and I wasn't about to risk dying for a collectible that wasn't really doing anything for me other than a 100% record.
Yeah, I was kind of the same. I started out going after them, and I think without them really giving you anything, the collectibles and also at the end of the levels, it gave you a rating based on how well you did. Both of those things sort of felt pointless to me. I think it kind of fell flat and wasn't really doing anything for me.
They didn't make me care about that. No, like it felt okay. Like the first couple levels to get an A or an S or whatever the top rating was. It was like, oh yeah, all right, I did okay. And then at the end, I'm just like, I beat it. I beat the level. That's great. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think games need to really think about why they're putting collectibles in and ratings and all these things. And even like on Xbox, you have achievements and stuff that a lot of times they're not really adding anything to the game. It's just sort of like, hey, here's another thing you can do, which, I mean, I guess is fine. It's not necessarily for me, and if somebody else is finding some joy in it, that's fine. But I would have liked that to be a little more meaningful, maybe give you something, or, you know, unlock something with it, secret characters or something like that would have made me a lot more interested to go back and get those collectibles. But as it was, I beat the game once and I didn't really have any motivation to go back to it.
No, I'm sure there are people out there that would want to complete this game or any game 100%, but that's not me.
Yeah,
I don't care about that.
And you did mention there, though, that reminded me of something, that you could grab stuff with your tongue in the beat 'em up levels, and that was the one spot where I found that this game actually was unique. Like, most of the different level types, they did fine at what they did, but they didn't really stand out all that much. It wasn't, like I said, a lot of them wouldn't have held up on their own, except the beat 'em ups. And the beat 'em up part, I feel like, was actually really polished, and I liked some of the abilities that you could get. You could grab stuff with your tongue, and I think either pull yourself to enemies or pull enemies to you.
Both, yes.
And you could grab health pickups by eating flies, and you could also spit bubble gum on enemies to tie them up for a minute.
Yeah.
And I liked that, like the amount of different moves that you had and stuff, and even with your combos and stuff, it was pretty good. It reminded me of, you know, the good old days of beat 'em ups. There was a couple of Spider-Man beat 'em ups where you could shoot webs at people.
Separation anxiety and maximum carnage.
And that was kind of what the bubblegum reminded me of. And so that was nice. It's the one thing that I would say that this game did really well was the beat 'em up sections. I thought they were really good.
They were a lot of fun. None of it was too complicated either, that you, like your Mortal Kombat style, have to press X, Y, down, up. Like, none of it was like that. You have a few buttons that do a few different things. You remember what they are, you remember to use them all, and you've got a pretty versatile character to play with. So
yeah. And the thing that's fun about the Battletoads too, that lends itself to this art style of, you know, the cartooniness, is that for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe there's some lore books out there, but they seem to be able to, like, morph, or at least morph, like, their arms and legs into different things.
Yes.
So, and I think this goes back to the original Battletoads, where you're punching somebody, but then you hit a good combo and your hand turns into an anvil and clocks them in the side of the head, or
I did see
something
some of
like
that. Yes.
So there was a lot of that was kind of fun in this. Like, I remember one where you turn into a jackhammer when you're, like, attacking from above. Yep. And there was, a few other ones.
Pimple turns into a train occasionally.
Yeah, you turn into some pretty big, heavy machinery, and that was kind of cool. That's sort of the Battletoads brand, I think. So it was nice to see them sort of have fun with that.
Mm-hmm. It does seem like the developers certainly have fun with this game.
Yeah, and I really thought that they seemed to do justice to the Battletoads, despite what roughly 50% of Steam reviewers might say. But anyway, that's about it that I've got to say for this. We've talked about what other people think, so let's talk about what you thought. I'm going to break it down into a couple of categories here before I get you to give me sort of an overall out of 10.
Oh, sure.
But on our same 1 to 10 scale, how would you rate the length of this one?
I believe you said, and I think you're right, it took about 5, maybe 6 hours. And so that's a pretty good length for me anyway. Much longer, and I would have been done with this. So I'm going to give this a 9 for length.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Like, the fact that it did change up in the different level types kept it feeling fresh. But I don't think I would have wanted this to really be much longer.
No, I agree.
I'm happy with sort of a game this length, and if I really want to play it again, I'll try it on a different difficulty or go for those collectibles or something.
Right.
What about the addictiveness? On 1 being not at all addictive, 10 being you couldn't put it down until you were finished.
Again, because this of the style of game that this was, where it had different levels, different types of levels, it it was fun without being too addictive for me. So as far as an addictiveness scale, I'd give this a this isn't a bad thing, but I would give it probably a 5 or a 6.
You didn't really feel like you needed to get back to it immediately,
No.
or like you couldn't stop playing it. It had a lot of natural stopping points, which is nice. I think that's a big thing for these kind of games compared to, your MMOs or things like that, that there is no real natural stopping point. There's always one more thing to do. But
Yes.
in this, there were clear levels where it said, congratulations, you beat the level, and you know that your game is saved there and you're picking up at the same spot the
Exactly.
next day or whatever.
And maybe that level was particularly difficult and I beat it and I'm like, okay, I did it. I completed a thing. I don't want to start another one, because sometimes they were a little long too. So it's like, okay, this is great. This is a perfect time for me to stop. But like you said, like thinking specifically of something I've played recently, Red Dead Redemption 2, always another thing to do, always another side quest, always another, hunt or something to do. So it's just, yeah, this is perfect.
Yeah, it's hard to stop
Oh yeah.
in a game like that where you have one big overarching map and it's full of little landmarks for you to go look at.
Little things to explore everywhere.
Yeah.
Those
I think
games
we
are
didn't
bad
really,
for me.
Yeah. We didn't really talk about the sort of the layout of this, but it was 4 chapters, I think, and each chapter had somewhere between probably 4 and 8 levels or something like that. So each level was kind of broken up into generally like 5 to 20 minutes, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So it was probably, it's a good game to play for shorter sessions. If you're not going to start a level and, be 35 minutes in and not want to leave because you still have half the level left to do or something. Like, there was a lot of those natural stopping points in this.
Definitely good for a busy player.
Yeah, and even if you did have to leave mid-level, the most you were going to lose is probably, 10, 15 minutes of progress. It's not
Sure.
that big
I think
a deal.
there's all kinds of checkpoints in the mid-level as well that you could start from next time.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I never
did that
left in
either.
the middle one.
No.
So that's a good point. Yeah, you might have been able to just jump right back in. All right. The other thing I want to ask you about is how difficult or frustrating was it? Because that's been a bit of a recurring theme with some of these games.
Well, we're doing a scale of 1 to 10 again, I assume?
Yeah, 10 being the most difficult or frustrating.
Head on the wall, yeah. Well, it's hard to say because there were so many different types of play in this game. So certain times I was very frustrated. So I would give this, as far as a difficulty frustration scale, a 7.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think it
wasn't the hardest game I've ever played, but there were some parts that I was definitely visibly frustrated at.
Yeah, and me too. I mean, you have the added pressure of playing it on Twitch, where everyone can say, "Man, what a loser! Why haven't you beat that level yet?"
Haha, dead.
Whereas I was just playing it at home by myself with no one making fun of me, and
But
there were a
except
couple
for yourself.
points. Yeah. the sled level, man, I was so mad at that level.
That
I
was
just was not
very-
having fun. It was, something like Katana Zero was probably harder than this, but it was more fun when it was hard. Like when this was hard and frustrating, it wasn't fun at the same time.
No. Well,
And I
the
think
reason
that
the
was
sled
tough.
level was so frustrating is because it didn't matter how many times you died. The invincibility didn't help you.
Yeah.
You could still fall off of a platform and die.
Yeah.
At least you could wait for invincibility in the spaceship levels, but this one you actually had to do it. You had to
Yeah.
hunker
I've
down
played
and
a
do it.
I've played a fair bit of like bullet hell type games, and I actually didn't have as much trouble in the space levels. Like I mean, I didn't breeze through them; they were still hard, but that those ones didn't frustrate me too badly. I think the hardest for me was probably the sled one for sure, and then probably the beat 'em up actually was probably one of my harder ones. But yeah, I don't think I got quite as frustrated because I didn't have as much trouble in the spaceship levels. Otherwise, we pretty much, I think, were around the same level of how tough this was for us.
Sure.
That's kind of the only things that we're rating on because we're doing this for people who are on a busy schedule. Those are the ratings that I think
That
we
matter.
should focus on. Yeah, exactly. If you want to see a full review, you can go online and find a full review. But is there anything else that you want to mention? Anything that was notable about this game, or any honorable mentions before we give it a final overall rating?
I normally don't like to mention this because I mean it's purely up to your own judgment. But my kids did love watching this game. It was fun for them. So
Yeah.
I would feel comfortable saying that this is fun to play with your kids watching.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the vibe that they were going for.
Yeah.
It seemed like they were trying to make a game that you could play with your kids, and I think that's probably especially because they're bringing back a franchise from when so many of us were kids.
Mm-hmm.
Who are now, the parents. It really was probably a cool game for a lot of people to introduce their kids to a franchise that they were into when they were their age, or things like that.
Yeah, definitely.
So, out of 10 overall, what do you think?
Well, I suppose overall, based on the other ratings, I would give this a 7. It was fun. It wasn't like my favorite game of all time, but I did enjoy it.
Yeah, I think I would probably agree with that. It wasn't my favorite game in the world, but I liked it. I had fun.
I suppose we should talk about our next choice. What are we going to be playing next week, or
Sure.
next time we're streaming?
For the next episode, we're gonna get into some goofy physics-based games. So I picked out 3 that are in Game Pass right now. Human Fall Flat is one. Totally Accurate Battle Simulator, and Totally Reliable Delivery Service are the other 2. There's a sort of a new genre coming out in the last few years of games that are just sort of goofy physics where the graphics aren't that great, the character models aren't that advanced, and everyone seems to kind of just stumble around and bounce off things and fall over, and so we've lumped these 3 together, and we'll see how you make out.
So physics being like a kind of a ragdoll game.
Yeah, I mean that's just what I'm calling them. I don't know if there's actually a name for this, but basically like, yeah, a lot of ragdoll, a lot of like just moving stuff around or things falling over, or in a couple of them there's some vehicles and stuff that you can drive, but it's not like you'd expect out of a modern game. It's all just sort of goofy, pulling on levers and seeing what happens and a lot of that kind of stuff.
I've played a lot of Goat Simulator with the kids. Is that would that be in the same genre?
Yeah, I think I would consider that kind of almost the first of that genre. Really, that was probably one of the earliest games I can remember that would have been like that, where the goal is kind of just to goof around.
Yes.
And everything's just kind of silly and awkward.
We've done a lot of that in that game. It's many goat hours. Man.
Yes. Yeah, I've played a few in that as well. It was a good co-op experience.
Yeah. It's pretty ridiculous. That's it for this week's episode. You can follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/RogDev, that's ROGDEV, to watch me stream the games we talk about, or catch up on old streams, or any of these episodes by subscribing to No Time to Game on YouTube. You can also join our Discord server with the link in the podcast description for important announcements and general chatter, or if you're more a fan of good old-fashioned email, you can send me questions, comments, or game suggestions to notimepod@gmail.com. We now have Twitter and Instagram at NTGpod. Thank you for listening to No Time to Game. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you can be notified of upcoming episodes. Press X to skip the credits.